This is where he came from. This is the land that produced him. The man they called Ike. A big land with a big sky, a long view, and a far horizon. The heartland of America. A land that first found its place in history as the end of the Chisholm Trail, the trail of the long, dusty cattle drives north from Texas. You cross this wide prairie with its ranges and wheatlands on your way to Abilene, Kansas, to a place in history. Abilene, Kansas, where it began and ended. The story of a man who made a place for himself in the history of this republic and of the world. And it's here, in Abilene, that all the segments of that story are brought together. Assembled in this center, visible and tangible, the record complete of Dwight David Eisenhower, his life and times. Within these buildings, history lives in the reflection of one man's life and its impact on all our lives. A record of yesterday, to be seen and heard, reviewed, recalled, relived, considered, studied, assessed, for whatever meanings and lessons, whatever illumination, guidance, or hope we may derive for today. Indeed, the more clearly we see Dwight Eisenhower and the office he held, the presidency of the United States, the better we know ourselves and our own place in history. So we come here to look back. We revisit our past. We trace the record from the beginning. In the house of Ida and David Eisenhower, maintained its contents intact as a permanent part of the center. Here, Dwight David Eisenhower, born October 14, 1890, in Denison, Texas, spent his boyhood. A little house, even by the standards of the day. Ike once remarked that its total floor space was considerably less than that of his personal office at the Pentagon. The furnishings are of pioneer simplicity, some handcrafted. Ike said of the family Bible,
"Well, that Bible was always there. In it are recorded all the births of the boys and the one dad. My father and mother, they read their Bibles rather assiduously."
In this kitchen, where Ike's well-publicized culinary interests of later life began, his mother taught him to cook. He rated himself as an expert on tamales, which he turned out in job lots for sale around Abilene. Some of the boys' school books are still here. Ike admitted they rarely suffered from overuse.
We didn't have to do quite as much homework in those days as you do now.
Space was at a premium in this house. Mother's household problems, Ike wrote, were monumental. The least was to provide comfortable beds for 6 boys. This, in time, became Ike's room, variously shared, like the second bedroom, with his brothers. East of the house, where the museum now stands, were the family's vegetable gardens, pictured in the museum mural.
Part of our discipline was to taking care of that block. We farmed it. We had 2 cows, we had a lot of chickens, we had 2 horses, and things of that kind.
For the Eisenhower boys, it was an active, outdoor life.
But baseball, anytime we were free, all of us were for baseball.
Outside Abilene were the woods where the boys hunted and camped. There was Mud Creek and the Smoky Hill River for fishing and swimming. Ike remembered these as the golden days. Other than an interest in history, especially ancient, young Ike showed little passion for academic matters. Looking back later, he described himself somewhat ruefully as either a lackluster student or one involved in a lackluster program. While his interests were athletic rather than scholastic, he did well enough in his grades. His high school yearbook, in fact, predicted for him a career as history professor at Yale. His brother Edgar said the yearbook would become president of the United States. After high school graduation, the best paying job young Ike could find was at this creamery. For 2 years, he put in 84 hours of night work a week at 26 cents an hour, amassing $90 each month. Part of this money went to help finance Edgar's college education. According to plan, Edgar was to repay Ike later with funds for his college expenses. But this never became necessary. Young Ike conceived a better idea, an expense-paid education at a United States Service Academy. His letters to Senator Bristow of Kansas eventually brought him conditional appointments to both West Point and Annapolis. He took competitive examinations for each. He later said,
"Well, to my amazement, I came out 1 all right in the Navy, but 2 in West Point. And then they found out that I was too old for Annapolis. Now, the only place to go was West Point, but here was a fellow ahead of me. And he failed physically. And so this put me in West Point."
The Abilene days ended here, where the old Union Pacific Station stood. From here, young Ike left for West Point. He was now committed to his country's service. It proved to be for life. He was in the class of 1915, known later as the class the stars fell on, so numerous were the generals it produced. Ike felt no great sense of commitment in those days. He said later, "From the first day at West Point, I often asked myself, what am I doing here? By what chance arrangement did I come by this uniform?" Indeed, Ike's ambition had been to become either Eisenhower, the crack railroad engineer, or Eisenhower, the big league shortstop. Never in his wildest fantasies did he picture himself as a maker of great judgments, a leader in historic conflict, a wielder of earth-shaking power. Yet, all this was ahead for him. At the Eisenhower Center today, you can trace his course from West Point to the post of Supreme Command. It was a long and sometimes frustrating road, spanning nearly 28 years. Those were the years when it seemed to him his career was headed nowhere. Despite all his efforts to get a combat assignment in World War I, it was denied him. He coached service football teams, among other routine and to him dead-end duties. Promotion came slowly. He saw service in Panama. He was assigned to the Command and General Staff School at Fort Leavenworth, and he was graduated first in his class. For 9 years, he served under Douglas MacArthur, part of that time as personal assistant to the general during his term as military advisor in the Philippines. And yet, in January 1940, Eisenhower, nearly 50 years old and only 6 years away from retirement, was still only a lieutenant colonel. But across the seas, events were already shaping that would affect him dramatically. In Europe and North Africa, the fury of World War II was mounting. In the far Pacific, Japan's build-up for conquest intensified, with all of Asia the goal. The question was no longer whether, but when the United States would be drawn into the conflict. And the answer came in the thunder of bombs on December 7th, 1941, at Pearl Harbor. 5 days after the attack, Army Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall summoned him to Washington. Ike was assigned to the War Plans Office, which mapped the strategy of all United States forces. And in 1942, Marshall appointed him, over the heads of scores of senior officers, Commanding General, European Theater of Operations. Suddenly, Ike was one of the most important men on earth. Under his command, the tides of battle began to turn. North Africa was retaken and secured. Allied forces took Sicily, then invaded Italy and moved north. In January 1944, Ike's headquarters moved to England to begin the climactic effort in Europe. At this table, as Supreme Commander of Operation Overlord, he began planning the epic assault to regain a continent from the Nazis.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months.
On June 6th, 1944, the awesome force of 1 million men, 11,000 planes, and 4,000 ships struck. On the beaches of Normandy, the doom of Hitler and his Third Reich was inexorably shaped. Total victory in Europe was to come less than a year later. On May 7th, 1945, with this hastily scrawled dispatch, Ike announced the surrender of the Nazi forces. At that time, VE Day, although he would have laughed at the notion, Ike was on his way to the White House. It would be less than 8 years until he arrived. He returned from Europe, acclaimed and honored as few men in history, by nations around the globe and by his own countrymen. He took over his new assignment, Army Chief of Staff in Washington. In 1948, with the nation at peace, if only tentatively and precariously, Ike retired from the service to become president of Columbia University. He now had time to write the first of several volumes of memoirs. But in 1950, the nation called him back. He was named commander of the European Defense Forces of NATO. This too was temporary. For even while he was abroad, the groundswell of demands for Ike's entry into national politics had begun. In June of 1952, back in this country, again a civilian, he went home to Abilene to announce his candidacy for the Republican nomination for the presidency. 2 months later, in Chicago, That nomination came to him on the convention's first ballot. His running mate was a young Californian named Nixon. By his own admission, Ike was totally green in the field of politics. But lack of political experience as such proved no handicap. There was something about him, an indefinable, unstudied kind of likability that had nothing to do with party lines or labels, had no real relation even to his military reputation and achievements. It was a warmth, a human quality that inspired affection, a personal charm of which a man who was later to occupy the White House himself said,
"It was the character of the man, not what he did, but what he was, that so captured the trust and faith and affection of his own people and of the people of the world."
Whatever the quality was that Ike had, it won the voters of America. They swept him into office by a landslide. Eisenhower's administration was, in a sense, not a beginning, but an extension of the determined search for peace he had carried on since Pearl Harbor, a search that had not ended with the war's termination. After his first day as president, he noted, "Plenty of worries and difficult problems. Today seems like a continuation of all I've been doing since 1941. Foremost among the problems was the Korean War, officially a United Nations action. Fulfilling his campaign pledge, Ike had gone to Korea before his inauguration in a bold move to start truce negotiations. 6 months after taking office, the new administration could announce an acceptable solution had been achieved to stop the fighting in the 3-year war. Eisenhower never abandoned the hope that personal trust between world leaders could be established as the first step toward positive cooperation. He would not yield to discouragement, even though he wrote, "I was getting tired of dealing with a communist generation set in the prejudices. But one day a new crop would wield power in the Soviet Union, and it was this generation I was trying to reach." Toward this goal, the president persisted with a new concept of personal diplomacy based on face-to-face meetings with leaders of other nations. He made an unprecedented series of visits to 26 countries in Europe, the Middle East, and Latin America, urging international trust and understanding among nations and peoples. And the gifts and mementos from these trips are on display in the museum at the Eisenhower Center. In 1953, he announced, "This government is ready to ask its people to join with all nations in devoting a substantial percentage of the savings achieved by disarmament to a fund for world aid and reconstruction, roads and schools, hospitals and homes, food and health, serving the needs rather than the fears of the world." And later, before the UN General Assembly, he delivered his notable Atoms for Peace address.
The United States pledges before you, and therefore before the world, its determination to help solve the fearful atomic dilemma.
He proposed a world organization to receive stockpiles of fissionable materials to be used for the peaceful pursuits of mankind. This led to the founding of the International Atomic Energy Agency. The president doubted that nations could afford or even survive an endless arms race. "Nations have paid the human price," he said, and spurred on by fear and competition, have continued to accept the burdens of armaments, the size and cost of which grow ever more fantastic. Disarmament, he believed, was mankind's only alternative to annihilation. He was ready and eager to negotiate arms reduction. But until others displayed the same willingness, he would see to it that we maintained our strength. He approved the start of a nuclear-powered naval force. Mrs. Eisenhower christened the first atomic submarine Nautilus. And when the Russians startled the world by orbiting the first man-made Earth satellite, Ike reacted instantly. He called for a concerted counter-effort by the United States to match the Soviet achievement. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration was created under civilian, not military authority. Within months, despite initial failures, American satellites were in orbit and the nation was on its way to eventual leadership in space. Programs were begun to put new emphasis in education on mathematics and the sciences. The National Defense Education Bill was passed. But international problems and global projects were not the sole concern of the administration. At home, the list of domestic achievements grew impressively. There was the Federal Highway Act, a prodigious step toward safer, more efficient motor travel. It initiated, among other road improvements, the new 41,000-mile interstate highway system, the largest single construction project in our history. The St. Lawrence Seaway Bill passed Congress. Together, Canada and the United States began construction of a vast waterway from the Atlantic to the very heart of the Middle West. The 49th and 50th states, Hawaii and Alaska, were welcomed into the Union. Eisenhower created a new cabinet agency, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. The National Education Act and a far-reaching school construction program were initiated. In 1954, the Supreme Court, under Chief Justice Warren, Eisenhower's personal appointee, handed down its landmark school desegregation decision. And when opposition developed, the administration did not hesitate to dispatch federal troops to enforce that decree. And the president went further. He recommended to Congress a sweeping civil rights program, assuring every citizen's right to vote and permitting government civil court action in civil rights cases. In 1956, this, the first civil rights legislation since 1875, became law. After a century of neglect, the problems of black Americans were at last being faced. Through his 2 terms as president, Eisenhower sought tirelessly for peace, and he at least avoided war. He spoke of fiscal responsibility, and he produced a balanced budget. He strengthened the nation's defenses, and at the same time sternly opposed concentrations of power in the hands of a few. In a farewell address one day before leaving office in 1961, he said,
"In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals."
This was and is his place in history.
I think we'll find out what caused it, go back and read the place.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Walter Matthau.
Joseph W. Stillwell had spent many years in the service of his country and was already an old man when he was called to greatness. His ordeal was both physical and mental, but he carried on where younger and stronger men fell by the wayside. He was a colorful commander, an inspiring leader, and one of our great military statesmen. His basic mission was to keep the Chinese an effective fighting ally in the Second World War. He carried it out with honor and distinction. He was a familiar figure, the bespectacled old man in the World War I campaign hat, marching briskly at the head of his men as they fought their way through the jungles and across the mountains of Burma. Although his bluntness of speech earned him the nickname of Vinegar Joe, to the millions of men who served under him, he was the kindest and most modest man who ever lived. To all of them, he was, and in memory still remains, Uncle Joe. I doubt if we will see his like again.
Joseph W. Stillwell was born in March of 1883, the place Palatka, Florida. His childhood and early youth, however, were to be spent in Yonkers, New York. Even in earliest years, he bore the stamp in appearance and in character of much we consider typically American. There was a love for sports, and in these he excelled. There were also mischievous high spirits, perhaps too high. Discipline was indicated. And so the family decision to send Joseph Stillwell to the military academy at West Point. The year was 1900, and the decision a fortunate one. Few men could know, as we know through hindsight, that young men with qualities of courage and leadership would be needed to serve the nation through ensuing years of crisis. Between the lines of a yellowed class yearbook, we can read hints of those qualities. For the young quarterback, they were already winning a permanent niche among West Point's football immortals. Was to prove as fortunate for the nation as was the decision to make the military his profession. In the crowded years not spent at the academy, there would be assignment to service schools and tours of duty in the Philippines and at home. Meanwhile, history was setting the stage for the first of our century's major crises, worldwide conflagration. In its flames, untried American leadership would be tested and tempered. Joseph Stillwell would be among those to receive their baptism of fire. Over there was the patriotic song of the hour. Over there sailed young American manhood to fight in the first international conflict of our history. With the temporary rank of major, Joseph Stillwell disembarked in France during the bleak, disheartening December of 1917. There followed a brief period of service with a British division. Then, with his fluency in French, he became liaison officer with the French 17th Corps. For the young major, there was now action at Verdun, Le Fère, Toul, San Miguel. For service in this last engagement, Stillwell, now Assistant Chief of Staff, 4th Army Corps, received the Distinguished Service Medal. For military attainments of a high order, read the citation. With the war's end, it was now Colonel Stillwell who went on to serve with the Army of Occupation within Germany. There he remained until July of 1919. By now, the enthusiastic scenes welcoming American troops back to civilian life were past history. Nor for the returned professional soldier would there be any termination of service. In full recognition of his talent for language, Joseph Stillwell's next assignment of duty was to take him to Peking, there to study and attain fluency in the many Chinese dialects. With him went his wife and their 3 children. 2 more would be born during the years in China. The comfortable Stillwell home came to reflect his growing appreciation of Oriental art. It was to earn him recognition as a connoisseur. To the Chinese people around him, the perceptive Stillwell brought his own humane understanding. Out of it came mutual respect and warm regard. One day in the future, these would help forge military victory. But before that day, there were to be years of service for Joseph Stillwell. Now he must return to the United States. Beside him at Fort Benning's Infantry Training School, fellow future general officers taught and studied. George C. Marshall, Omar Bradley, names that were to become household words in a nation at war. At Fort Leavenworth's Command and General Staff School, there were additional years of study. Then, once again, it was back to China, this time as military attaché to the United States Embassy in Peking. Here he remained as the clash of conflicting interests between Japan and the awakening giant China led inevitably to incident, and incident to all-out war. The incident was Manchuria. The military machine of the Mikado required no organizing, for the military clique which then held power had long anticipated this day. The overall plan was to decimate China, reduce her province by province. Japan's modern air force would meanwhile be destroying China's sources of power to resist. Chinese courage proved no defense against the perfected military efficiency of the enemy. On hand as American observer was Colonel Joseph Stillwell. It became his growing and unshakable conviction that the Chinese soldier was a first-class fighting man. He needed only first-class equipment, first-class leadership. Chiang Kai-shek, the one leader able to preserve Chinese unity, was by now forced to withdraw to the interior city of Chongqing. From here he sought endlessly to enlist the aid of other nations. There had already occurred the Panay incident, in which an American ship in Chinese waters had been sunk by Japanese bombers. This had crystallized the American sentiment that had long inclined to sympathy for China. Aid had come as young Americans volunteered their services. Acting unofficially as private citizens, one such group, the Flying Tigers, were winning fame as they took impressive toll of Japanese planes. For China's armies engaged in their unequal struggle, arms and equipment were now made available. To cut off these sources of material aid, Japan systematically occupied or blockaded one after another of China's port cities. In effect, she built a wall around China. Deprived of needed supply from without, a weakened China would be vulnerable to the heavy blows of the invading forces. Once shattered, she could be conquered piecemeal. The former American observer was now back home again, serving at California's Presidio. A major general, he commanded the 3rd Army Corps. Step by step, history was setting the stage for its climactic tragedy. Out of that tragedy, Joseph Stillwell would emerge to play a heroic role. From a country stunned by disaster, General Stillwell was sent to China, there to serve as Chief of Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek's Allied staff, and with a small American staff to take nominal command of China's 5th and 6th Armies. The new responsibility brought him his 3rd star. In the absence of clear-cut Allied command lines, General Stillwell's first job was to help in the defense of Burma. Burma offered the only route by which material aid could be fed into China. China must be built up, made stronger and stronger, until her allies could join her in going over to the offensive. That would be a far-off day, for her allies were preoccupied with other theaters of war. The Burma which was to know Stillwell's exploits had ceased to be a modern Eden of song and romantic fiction. It had become a battlefield. General Stillwell and his Chinese, together with outnumbered British, Free French, and Dutch troops, fought on, but the effort was doomed. The Japanese steamroller pushed on. It had administered humiliating defeats to the Allies in the Pacific and elsewhere in Southeast Asia. It had taken over thousands of square miles, together with peoples and resources. Now it rolled across Burma. India's borders lay open to attack. Worst of all, that last vital land route, the Burma Road, lay useless. Once again, the old lesson must be learned. Courage alone is not enough. For the Allies, withdrawal became retreat. Retreat, a nightmare route. In the ordeal, Joseph Stillwell's full stature revealed itself. Refusing the comforts his age and rank might have claimed, he personally conducted one group of 400 battered troops, Burmese nurses and civilians, to the safety of India. There at New Delhi, he was to utter the now classic admission of defeat and announce his determination to go back and wipe it out. Here was the honesty, the directness, the tough moral fiber that characterized the man. The battered campaign hat and shirt sleeves now became a familiar sight as the job of regrouping and training began. Supply for besieged China, cut off from her allies, must now depend on a limited number of transport planes, the few that Allied command could make available. Forced into a round-the-clock system, these were also bringing out of China the manpower that would be needed for that return to Burma. In one such operation, 14,000 troops were carried without loss or mishap. Limited too in number were the planes needed for the thousands of Chinese flyers in training, and even for those units which must continue aerial warfare against the enemy within China. American Flying Tigers were now a part of regular fighting forces, and these still flew for their old leader, General Chennault. And now another of Joseph Stillwell's goals must be pressed. Nothing less than a new road to bypass the severed link of the old Burma Road. Modern machinery and trained manpower could clear at the Indian end of the projected loop. At the China end, it was a far different story. Here it must be back-breaking manual labor with primitive tools. Men, women, and even children threw themselves into the Herculean task. China knew what was at stake, and China responded. From Quebec, Canada, came heartening news. Allied leadership in conference authorized greater aid and a newly organized Southeast Asia Command. Supreme Commander was to be Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten, his deputy, Lieutenant General Joseph Stillwell. The increase in material aid was making greater demands upon air transport. Suddenly, the hitherto ignored operation captured the imagination of the outside world. Flying over the hump became a familiar phrase. Behind the phrase lay the reality of every type of plane available, many lacking modern instruments. flying back and forth in unpredictable weather, their route over uncharted and treacherous mountains. The stockpile for this, the stepchild of the war effort, was mounting. The tools of battle were now ready and waiting to help settle an old score. The sideshow war had been remembered. Air power opened the prelude to attack. And to sustain it, fighters and bombers of the newest types arrived in increasing numbers. Soon the prelude to attack was no longer a curtain raiser, but the first stage of fiery assault. The day had come. Men from China, from all parts of the British Commonwealth, from India and Burma, and from far off Africa. Men of many races, many tongues were on the march, and with General Stillwell's polyglot army, a growing number of American units. Among them were General Merrill's troops, experienced fighters from the Pacific Theater. Merrill's Marauders was to be their popular name as they helped make history. In the 2 years of preparation, General Stillwell had molded a machine to beat the enemy at his own game, mountain and jungle warfare. Man-made weapons would exact casualties, but losses even heavier were inflicted by malaria, dysentery, hepatitis, and a wide range of tropical diseases. For the men who fought, enemy metal could hit as hard, sickness could be as crippling as in any other theater. For them, Burma was no sideshow. Supply for the men in their isolated pockets of warfare often had to come by airdrop. In twisting mile-deep canyons and jungle-covered terrain, a miss by a few yards could be as bad as missing by a few hundred miles. Seemingly everywhere was lean, raw-boned Uncle Joe, as he was referred to generally. Bluntness had also earned him the title Vinegar Joe. Doubtless there were saltier names coined in the ranks. Doubtless, too, Joseph Stillwell chuckled over them in private. The overworked term soldier's soldier has lost much luster. But Joseph Stillwell, sharing the hardships and dangers of his men, gave the phrase real meaning. His was the unique capacity for commanding respect and obedience while evoking a genuine affection. Perhaps no group regarded the general and the man with warmer feelings than did the Chinese troops in his command. It was no secret that General Se, as he was called, had consistently extolled their courage and promoted their welfare, often in the face of adverse opinion from above. Repaying that faith now were unbroken Chinese victories in the field. Southern Burma, names like the Salween and Irrawaddy rivers were back in the news. But now these were scenes of successes. It was the enemy who yielded as British-led Allied forces reclaimed more and more of Burma's soil. North and south, it was the same story. An old humiliation was being erased. It was now 2 years since the retreat from Burma, and the 61-year-old general could see his timetable for victory working out on schedule. In the circumstances, a birthday celebration was a pleasant and well-earned respite. The presence of a son, Colonel Joseph Stillwell, Jr., marked it a family occasion as well. But however welcome, such respites must be few and far between. The forgotten Cotton War in both South and North had reached its climax. The enemy knew well that each mile of ground lost in northern Burma meant another mile added to the link between India and China. The Lido Road was growing. On the heels of combat troops, often under enemy harassment, came the men who must hack out that road. The land itself fought back. Jungle growth would completely reclaim and obliterate in 2 weeks' time the work that neither the enemy nor disease nor climate could halt. Against the enemy, there was the rifle always close by. To fight the soil, every weapon from the axe to explosive charge was employed. The work went on. General Joseph Stillwell was almost literally dragging behind him. Yet, as he pushed on and the enemy grudgingly yielded, the mule trail became a road. In relative safety, engineering could expand the road into a solid truck route. As it neared completion, the derisive phrase, "impossible road," was heard less often. Across jungle-covered plateaus it stretched, across rivers untamed since the creation, yet now they had been harnessed and bridged. Across mountain ranges it traveled to narrow the gap between India and China. Then inevitably came the great day, the day when a first convoy could move along its 1,044-mile length. The enemy had been pushed out of northeast Burma and the way lay clear. Considering the difficulties and the hardships that had been borne in shaping its tortuous route, there seemed merit in the words of an American colonel who at the outset had said, "You don't have to be crazy to do this job, but it helps." Yet the Lido Road was now a reality. The first convoy rolled into Kunming, a token of the supply flow to follow. Honoring the man who had weathered all opposition to build the route, it was renamed the Stillwell Road. 4 months later, Allied command could announce victory in Burma. What of the man who had built the road and forged that victory? The tides and cross-currents of events had taken him far from what would have been his hour of triumph. Receiving his 4th star, General Stillwell came home to serve as commander of ground forces. Then off to the Pacific for a tour of battle fronts and installations. In the course of those next months, he became commander of the 10th Army. Later, he was to serve as commanding general at Okinawa. But wherever the assignment, the Stillwell story remained unchanged. He was still blunt, unassuming Uncle Joe, the general with no patience for pomposity and pretense. He was still the gaunt, typical American who somehow reminded of the symbolic figure Uncle Sam. More important, he was still the Joseph Stillwell with an understanding of the men in the ranks and a talent for winning their affection. It was, of course, his own feelings being reflected, as warm feelings always are. Summer of 1945 was ending, and so too history's most devastating war. Like another great military leader who had vowed to return to the scenes of earlier defeat and erase its humiliation, General Stillwell would welcome the date September the 2nd. Aboard the battleship Missouri, on that day, General of the Army Douglas MacArthur submitted the formal surrender terms to a defeated enemy. An end had come to the agonies of a tortured world. Peace had come, in victory and with honor. Once again, for General Stillwell, there was assignment to the Presidio. but now as a prelude to well-earned retirement. At nearby Carmel was his family and the home he loved. Here he had planned to pass the rich remaining years that lay ahead. But now, a new enemy struck. This was the enemy within, one who would not be defeated. On October 12, 1946, after a short illness, stout-hearted Joseph Stillwell died. By his own instructions, ceremony was omitted. His ashes strewn out on the Pacific, whose waters play against the shores at beautiful Carmel. Today at West Point, the General's old campaign hat and combat boots are treasured mementos. There hangs, too, a portrait to recall Joseph W. Stillwell's career of service to his country. To the men he led, an example and an inspiration to greatness.